The limiting principle.
Don't be a retard.
Never be retarded.
Death before retardation.
The limiting principle. The limiting principle podcast.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Limiting Principle Podcast. This is Patrick doing another solo episode. My co-host Angel is off doing things in the real life, spending time with real humans. I don't do anything. I basically just record this podcast and play around with AI music. I've stopped showering. I've stopped brushing my teeth. I haven't fed my dog in 3 weeks. Her corpse is laying right next to me. I am in a very dire state of affairs, but that's good news for you guys, because I'm going to talk about today the end of tyranny. You look at it's a little skull guy with a Christmas hat with a sword, and he's broken the white, baby blue, and baby pink sword of the Troon. The Troon is very upset. Obviously, there's a battle raging in the background inside this Colosseum-like structure. Everything is on fire, smoke everywhere, and if you look at the title, "The End of Tyranny," you'll see the Y is in red. And if you don't look at the Y, what does it say? The end of tYranny. Because, my friends, you cannot spell tyranny without tYranny. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this today was because of the massive amount of issues and topics that have been happening involving troonery, involving the Troons, involving the trans movement. The Conservative Party, the Republican Party seem to have come together on one day and issued a bunch of edicts, a bunch of different rulings involving specifically trans kids. And you can't see me, but I'm using air quotes right now, involving trans kids. And of course, there's no such thing as a trans kid. The only thing that exists is a groom kid. It's not a coincidence that there are barely any quote unquote trans kids in red states. There's a lot of different reasons, I think, for kids that believe they're trans. I do think there is some sort of, I've talked about this before, some sort of naturally occurring phenomenon. We describe it as gender dysphoria, where a child feels, say a little boy feels discomfort with his male body and believes that he is the opposite sex. They would say it's the opposite gender, but that's just a trick. It's a magic trick they're using to conflate their made-up concept of gender, of a gender soul, with sex in order to trick unsuspecting normies into allowing them to experiment on kids. So you have gender dysphoria. Obviously, these men that are transitioning later in life are most likely just sexual deviants. The big theory, Ray Blanchard's theory of autogynephilia, is often bandied about. What's autogynephilia? Basically, a man that gets off on the idea of himself becoming a woman. It's very creepy, very, very creepy. It's a very disturbing paraphilia. You know, I'm pretty sure that's why you'd see all these transsexuals, quote unquote, existing back in like the 80s and the 70s and the 90s. Just perverted men who have some sort of mental illness, some sort of paraphilia, and they literally get off on thinking that they're women. In fact, there's a bunch of different, of course, Reddit is just a treasure trove of troonery. If you ever want a good laugh, just go on Reddit and type in trans or transgender or queer. You will just be introduced to the most depraved minds that exist in humanity. There are so many posts about men they're like, wow, I really feel like a woman. And then I get gender euphoria, which gives them, of course, a lady boner, a euphoria boner, as they call it. There's so many of them that end up masturbating. And upon completion, they make another post and they're like, I felt like a woman before I got off. But now that I've gotten off, I don't really feel like a woman anymore. That's because you're not a woman, you fucking lunatic. Does womanhood just go away for a man if the man masturbates to completion? I don't think that's how womanhood works. I'm just gonna throw that out there. And then, of course, there are a larger phenomenon with children of today is obviously discomfort with their puberty, specifically for young girls. And they're like, I feel uncomfortable in my body. And then somebody goes, oh, that might be because you're actually a boy. That's why you feel discomfort in your body. So let's put you on puberty blockers and eventually move you over to cross-sex hormones. Their development is stunted. Their growth is stunted. They don't go through puberty. In fact, they call it forced puberty, as if puberty is a sickness, some sort of condition, as if it's not one of the most natural things in the world. But these kids are looking everywhere, and they're growing up in a world where adult male perverts are trying to validate their perversions and are looking to children to suggest, see, even though I'm a perverted male, I'm actually not a perverted male, and I'm actually a woman. And do you see, I was always a woman. So when I was a little boy, I actually wasn't a little boy. I was a little girl. Of course, it's framed in this faux empathetic guise of, I just don't want that child to suffer like how I suffered, and I want them to embrace their true selves. And it's not empathy, it's depravity, it's deranged. I'm having a hard time trying to think of a more evil political movement than the modern transgender movement. I know that there are political movements that obviously led to more extreme forms of evil in terms of genocides, mass starvations, things like that. But the goals of this movement are they're explicitly evil. Fundamentally, at its core, it is a rejection of reality, of God, of existence. And they specifically target kids. I can't think of any more evil movement, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So Marjorie Taylor Greene introduced, I believe it's called the Protect Children's Innocence Act. We'll get into a little bit more later. But Marjorie Taylor Greene introduced this bill through Congress, through the House of Representatives, and it was passed. And it does many things. One of the things that it's going to do is further stigmatize experimenting on children, further stigmatize what it means to be trans, and it's moving the Overton window. It's moving the acceptable area of discourse that we could talk about this in, because so much of this movement is built around kids. And I often say, well, yeah, there's no such thing as a trans boy or a trans girl, but of course, follow that to its logical conclusion. There's no such thing as a trans man, like an adult male. There's no such thing as a trans man or a trans woman. Now, advocates, quote unquote, anti-trans advocates and activists often focus on the kids. And I'll talk to a lot of purists, and I'm one of these purists, and they discuss, yeah, but men and women can't be trans either. Nobody should be allowed to transition. And of course, that is the goal, which is hilarious because a trans advocate will tell you that that is a form of genocide. And if that's a form of genocide, I don't know what to tell you. I view it as helping mentally ill people, even the paraphilic people, even these people that advocate for these evil policies, they are also victims of these same policies, even though they are the ones that are advocating for them. They're still victims. They've been tricked into thinking that this discomfort, this sickness that they have is some sort of legitimate phenomenon that all of society should validate. And I don't see how it's any different than telling a schizophrenic person who believes that they're Jesus, that they are Jesus, and that they are going to reenact the crucifixion and then nailing them on a cross. I'm not trying to be heretical here. I'm a Christian, but you get my point. We shouldn't validate mental illness, especially when that mental illness is being used in order to justify mass child experimentation. Thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of kids being put on puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. The majority of those children are then lied to by their parents, by medical professionals, by almost every single mainstream institution in existence. So these children end up staying on the puberty blockers. And of course, what happens to a little boy if you put him on puberty blockers? He never goes through puberty. He's rendered with a micro penis. And then eventually, what do you do when you're an adult? What is it when you're an adult and you're like, I don't know about this. Maybe I made a mistake. And it's like, well, okay, but you made a mistake, but now you're a grown man with a tiny penis. And you can't achieve erection. You can't have an orgasm. You can't do any of that. Also messes with your bones. There's all different kinds of debilitating side effects that come along with this. And of course, we don't even know what the true long-term effects of mass experimentation on humanity that this will incur. We have no idea. We'll find out eventually, and I'm assuming it's going to be horrific. So back to the purist argument, I agree with that. I don't want anyone to be able to do this. I don't think it should have representation in media. I don't think it should be in the government. I don't think it should be, definitely should not be in schools. It should be viewed as, oh man, this person's suffering some sort of sickness. Let's get them mental health. It's crazy how many therapists have fallen for this as well. Like the entire field of therapy is about correcting and redirecting wrong forms of thought and realigning it with something that is true, or maybe telling yourself a story in order to make yourself feel better about something happened in the past and coping with past trauma. This is the exact opposite. Instead of realigning the mind with material reality, you're trying to realign the material reality, the body, with the mind. It is the complete opposite of what the entire therapeutic field is about. It is insane to me that so many therapists endorse this. Truly insane. I've talked to therapists on this, and I've tried to use this logic on them, and they'll be like, "Oh, well, gender is a complex, infinite type of spectrum thing. We can't really tell. Like, it's all areas of gray." And they cite a bunch of things about intersex and all these different conditions, and I'm like, look at them, and I'm like, hey, like the intersex, these people that are born with these deformities, these girls that are born without the ability to conceive birth, without wombs, or whatever you want to say, those are the exceptions that prove the rule, right? We shouldn't base all of reality and alter all of reality based on the exceptions. It makes no sense. So Marjorie Taylor Greene sponsored a bill. I think it's the Protecting Children's Innocence Act. We'll find out here soon. And it passed through the House, which is amazing news. Now, it's going to have to go to the Senate, and the Republicans do not have the votes to stave off a filibuster by the Democrats. So it's most likely not going to pass through the Senate, which is one of the reasons why I am absolutely irate at people like Candace Owens and these black pill people. Oh, we have to tear everything down. Everything is a lie. All of the right is controlled opposition. And it's like, okay, well, I'm sure lots of things are lies. I'm not a huge fan of the Trump administration. He's way too cozy with different kinds of transhumanists and sort of technocrats that want to control mankind. But I mean, if the end result is us being enslaved either way and living in some sort of slave technological surveillance state, we might as well live in that slavery without children being butchered. And plus, I believe that the entire trans phenomenon is a Trojan horse to introduce more transhumanist aspects of body augmentation. They're already talking about it. You've seen it in previous episodes, turning genitalia into flowers, abstract pieces of art, people modifying their bodies in any way they want. They call it morphological freedom. So if we can stop this here, we can maybe stop a lot of that stuff from happening. I often have a fatalist view on this because I am rather black-pilled on the big picture, but it's just, you can't live your life like that. You need some hope, so maybe you lie to yourself and create that hope. But, lots of horrible things have happened, and lots of good throughout history, and lots of good people have stepped up to stop those horrible things from happening. Now, I have my disagreements with Marjorie Taylor Greene. I think she's a little wacky, little bit wacky, but her anti-child mutilation advocacy is second to none. Now, on the complete opposite end of the political spectrum, we have this absolute lunatic. This woman should not be allowed to run for office. This is one of the problems with liberalism. Any lunatic can get in. And I know, well, you have a monarchy, right? Well, what if you have a bad king? It's okay. What if you have a bunch of insane lunatics that want to mutilate kids and get so rich in office and cater to special interest groups that they don't actually represent the people? So, I mean, I guess we live in a democracy. Do we even live in a democracy? Doesn't really seem like it's much of a constitutional republic, even though there are some of those rules still in place that make a lot of this stuff a little bit harder to do. The Constitution can be used for good, and it can also be weaponized for evil against good. So we have this lunatic. I still can't pronounce her name. Pramila Jayapal. She is an insane woman. I believe she has a quote-unquote trans kid, and she was the main sponsor behind the Trans Bill of Rights, which we've talked about before as well. Trans Bill of Rights being, of course, probably the most totalitarian bill in existence. that's ever existed. If you look at it and you actually understand how to read it, you have no choice but to arrive at the conclusion that it would institute a nationwide trans theocracy where thousands of children would just be hundreds of thousands of children eventually, even millions would be experimented on. And of course, in addition to the thousands of thousands of thousands of children that are actually being chemically and sometimes physically castrated through mutilation surgeries, having their bodies augmented, you also have millions and millions of children and adults being indoctrinated into a queer lens. Not just that, oh, that trans person can do what they want, like whatever, pass that law. It's not that. It's that they're taking all of our institutions and molding them into a queer theory infused state of existence. So it's not enough for me to go, well, I don't think that person's trans or whatever, but they can think there. That's fine. We live in a liberal democracy, whatever. No. We have to believe that they are trans. We have to look at the sex binary and realize that the sex binary is a lie. Is that fascism? The state teaming up with all of these different institutions, these different corporations, and trying to enforce this onto the populace, trying to force it onto the populace? It seems a lot like fascism. And I know a lot of them are communists because the left is largely comprised of Fabian socialists. But, communism, socialism always leads to fascism because, of course, communism can never be here by definition, right? There's hardly any difference. I know like fascism has a more nationalistic type of approach, whereas communism is this sort of more global enterprise. But in terms of the enforcement structures that are put in place and the totalitarianism and the centralization of power, communism and fascism are very similar. And fascism is usually more concerned with nationalism, race, tradition, and things like that. But in terms of how the power is distributed, it's all very centralized. So Pramila Jayapal is the lunatic that sponsored that bill, and she is just so upset. She is so upset about Marjorie Taylor Greene's bill being passed through the House of Representatives. Let's hear what she has to say.
What is happening on this floor and in this Congress around this issue is so incredibly dangerous. Trans kids are walking around with mace in their pockets.
That's good to mace you.
Being attacked.
You are attacking
because
them.
The majority is insisting there's something to fear from them.
They should fear
you.
you.
Stand for these kinds of attacks. The condescension that is coming from the other side. Have you talked to your constituents? Do you really know? You don't really know what you're doing. Excuse me. We are here to...
And that's actually true, of course. She has no idea what she's doing. She's just a lunatic, just a crazy person. She's completely insane, detached from reality, suffering from psychosis. That's how you have to look at this. Imagine thinking that children should have their body parts cut off and should be experimented on with chemicals. It's insane. Imagine if some guy down the street from you was experimenting on some kid in his house because he thought that he could find the kid's inner gender soul. There's no difference. It's just been, all of our institutions have been infiltrated by this postmodern thought. So it's normalized. People always ask me, I always thought, like, how do these evil things happen all throughout history in all these societies? Well, this is how they happen, right? The Nazis just didn't wake up one day. All the German people didn't wake up one day and think that it was okay to start rounding up Jews. Same in the USSR with their with their conditions, their material conditions. The same in Mao's China. There's so many other examples. Those are just the three that that are most prominent in my mind. You gain control of the institutions. You put your people in those institutions. You change the institutions to reflect your ideology, so the people that trust the institutions don't view it as ideology anymore. They view it as true. And so whatever they tell you, you just believe. And of course, a lot of libs and progressives, and they don't believe this. I've talked to progressives who tell me that they support trans rights, and then I tell them that trans rights is experimenting on kids, having men in women's restrooms, having men and and boys in girls' bathrooms, locker rooms, changing rooms, in their sports, in their prisons. And I tell them about all this. Like, well, I don't support any of that. And it's funny because I'll look at them and be like, congratulations, you are a cis heteronormative white supremacist, just like I am. So most people, when confronted with this, if pushed on enough, especially if they're smart, they like, well, we don't support that. And yet they still virtue signal that they do, because it's not about supporting marginalized groups. They're trained to do that. They are brainwashed to support anything any of these marginalized groups say. But when it really comes down to it, a lot of them don't support it, which is why this issue is so important, because maybe they could look at this and be like, oh, maybe the right isn't, not all of them are evil, fascists, lunatics. They're actually supporting a lot of the things that I would support. I don't support trans rights. So I do think that even though this isn't going to get passed in the Senate, most likely not without some sort of Christmas miracle, or it's probably not going to happen until after Christmas, some New Year's miracle, it's not going to get passed. I do think it's important for this kind of thing to keep happening. It's like when you're trying to get this stuff out of schools, right? You want to create enough lawsuits, and even though you might not win the lawsuits, you create this momentum behind you and create a movement behind you, and eventually you can defeat such an evil movement.
Represent our districts, and I still believe I'm the member that gets the most votes of any member of Congress anywhere in the country. So don't tell me I don't know how to represent my district. What you are doing today, what this majority is doing today, is making life dangerous for kids.
Ha!
And what the majority is doing today is getting in the way of families and parents and kids.
I love this, right? The Democrats are very totalitarian. They always talk about democracy, but democracy is just a magical word for their power. I always love, and the trans movement, all of a sudden they become small government libertarians. And I think she throws it back in their faces here in a minute, but they'll go, oh, I thought the Republicans were small government. Why do they want to police kids' bodies and step on the rights of their parents to make the right decisions for their kids? As if they care about small government, as if they care about individual rights, as if their entire project is not to wear away at what has made America America. But all of a sudden, when it comes to experimenting on kids, they're basically a bunch of Ron Pauls, essentially.
Making the decisions that they need to make so that they can live, so that they don't commit suicide.
Oh, she's so evil.
What parent in this body or anywhere in this country wouldn't do anything for their children?
Oh my God.
What parent doesn't want their kids to live?
Psychotic.
This is dangerous.
Psychotic.
You are putting our kids at risk.
Everything is projection.
And I will not stand for it. The American people won't stand for it. Vote no on this horrific and cruel bill.
Now, see, I feel bad for this woman. She's been driven insane. I don't think that she's I don't know. This is where you get into tricky territory. What makes an evil person evil? These people are committing evil acts. They're promoting an evil agenda, an objectively evil agenda. It's not even a matter of opinion. I don't care what your worldview is and how you view reality. You're just wrong if you support this. It's the only thing in the world that I'm confident in saying when it comes to good and evil. I mean, not the only thing, but one of the things. Abortion being the other one. So is this person evil? Well, she's advocating for evil things. She wants kids to be experimented on. She is allowing her own child to be experimented on. So I guess this person's evil, but she doesn't think she's evil. She's largely been tricked. She trusts the experts. She trusts the institutions. She thinks that what's happening to kids is based on real science when it's not. It's just gobbledygook, just complete nonsense. So is she evil? I mean, I guess she's evil, but, she's not like a serial killer who, like a sociopath walking around who's like, I am consciously evil and I'm going to kill you. She's not that. But what she's advocating for is just evil. Yes. And then, of course, we have Congresswoman Sarah McBride. And he is rising above Republican hatred, taking the high road, even though the left views this bill as a literal act of attempted genocide. Here's brave woman Sarah McBride talking about how she's rising above, I got two into character there, how he is rising above the evil of the Republican Party. And by the Republican Party, I mean the majority of humanity. The majority of the country does not support doing this to kids. They just are terrified, brainwashed, have no idea what's happening, and they don't speak out against it. And think about it, it's mostly out of sight, out of mind. They don't really know the scope of what's happening to kids. I've woken people up from this. I mean, I woke up from this. I was a leftist. It's one of the reasons why I talk about this so much. It was the Rittenhouse thing. I was kind of coming out of the leftist fog, and then I watched Rittenhouse. I watched all of the videos and the on-the-ground testimonies, whatever, of the people that were there. Watched all the videos, and I watched the trial live. And at the same time, later that night, I watched MSNBC coverage of it. And I was like, it was shocking to me. It broke through the red pill. We'll call it the red pill. It broke through the dissonance in me that was not completely willing to leave leftist society behind. To see the media just so blatantly lie about what happened at Rittenhouse, it just snapped me out of it. This was the other thing too, because I was taken advantage of as a kid. And, kids and animals, obviously, there's a kid and an animal in a fire. Who are you going to save? You're going to save the kid. But still, kids and animals, they're innocent, right? Just little babies. Dogs are adorable and don't know how to hate. I know there's bad dogs, but, that's just the dog goes crazy. Humans are what grow up to be bad. Humans have sin. And I suppose through the Christian lens, children have sin as well. I think I'm going through orthodoxy right now, so I hope that's not a non-orthodox approach to that. But children are the purest form of innocence. So to take advantage of children, and then for me to realize that I was tricked into supporting those children being taken advantage of, I think about this topic a lot, obviously. I've studied it for thousands of hours. But I do have to dissociate myself away from it a little bit and compartmentalize my emotions surrounding it. Because if I think about it too much, it wrecks me, like emotionally devastates me. And I know people make fun of people that get emotionally devastated about politics. But I mean, when you think about what's happening to kids, how they're being lied to everywhere, all this stuff in kids' cartoons, all of it, it's just almost too much to bear. So that's kind of what brought me here, why I'm so obsessed with this topic. Anyways, here's Sarah McBride.
You're an inspiration to millions.
Oh, millions.
The class and the grace that you have shown in the face of cruelty. How do you do that?
Well, one thing that you learn in politics, and you certainly have to learn quickly in politics as a trans person.
Literally just sounds like a dude that got his balls cut off. I can, like one thing, I could do. Give me enough time and I can master my woman's voice. It's just a dude. It's just I don't know if I'm assuming he's gotten bottom surgery. He seems like a committed acolyte to this. So let's listen to how brave he is.
And is to have thick skin. And I knew that when I ran for this office, there would be some people here who would seek to use my service as an opportunity for themselves to get attention. And I know when you are a first in a space, there will,
which is hilarious. Right? I think this is the first openly or the first trans quote unquote woman in Congress. But of course, this person is, some sort of cluster B histrionic weirdo. So everything he does is for attention, right? He needs the world to validate him in order for him to find worth. The entire trans ideology and the ideology surrounding blackness when it comes to the left, but we're not going to talk about that right now. But all of this entire insistence on the world needing to validate who you are, and you'll never be your true self until the world realizes you as that, and how everything is the world's fault. It's literally just narcissism. So kids that are taught this worldview and how to view themselves in reality, they're just being turned into narcissists. And of course, there is a method, a map, a blueprint to creating a narcissist. They're doing that with social emotional learning. It's a whole other topic. You could turn people into narcissists. People are turned into narcissists by over-controlling, overbearing, horrible mothers, by neglectful fathers. People are turned into narcissists like that. And the left has weaponized this ability for them to understand how people can become narcissists, and are actually fostering it, specifically in children. Every time you think you've like reached the bottom of the barrel with this in terms of the depravity, it just always goes another level. Downwards and downwards and downwards into the pit of hell.
There will be people who will not only use your service or your presence to try to get attention for themselves, but they will throw anything at you to get a rise out of you in order to prove to people that people like you don't belong. And I didn't sign up for this job lightly. I didn't sign up to run lightly. I really debated whether to do this for a whole host of reasons, including what I knew would come. But I always said during the course of this campaign, when I was running for this seat, that They were going to try to throw this stuff at me. They were going to try to bait me. They were going to try to.
I'm not going to watch anymore because I can't take it. I'm going to fucking lose it. I'm going to lose it. I wonder if the microphone popped on that one. I can't watch this anymore. It's just cry bully, right? Hey, let me inject the ideology responsible for creating me in the first place. Let me inject that into all of society, and then let me target your children with it. And if you don't do it, well, that just means that you're targeting me. That's just because I'm the first trans woman in Congress. And you're just being mean to me because I'm different. Like, it's so, oh man, the projection, and all these people, all they do is project, because their entire identity is based around holding a cognitive dissonance in their head that can never be resolved, right? Because a man can't become a woman can't become a man. It's obviously their entire identity is based around this cognitive dissonance being held in their head, these distinctions that can never be resolved. So they're very unaware of, I mean, I'm sure there's just some people that are like, yeah, I'm a perv, and I'm just a perv who wants to take advantage of this move to trans all of society. But most of them are completely unaware of their actual compulsions and the reason for why they're doing what they're doing. So, you know, that's why it's pointless to talk to these people unless you're talking to them for an audience to hopefully show some critical thinkers out there how insane they are. That's really the only worth that comes from talking to these people. And there we have Sarah McBride again, of course, being flanked by AOC.
So we are 2 legislative days away from the Affordable Care Act tax credits expiring, when millions of people will see their healthcare premiums skyrocket. And GOP leadership.
Oh, I hate it. Oh, the tax credits. Everyone's health insurance is going to go up. And all the GOP cares about is trying to stop me from mutilating kids. Fuck you, quote unquote, Sarah.
With that deadline fast approaching, has decided to schedule 2 votes on anti-trans bills and precisely 0 votes on extending the Affordable Care Act tax credits. They would rather.
It's funny because I have a lot of problems with the GOP and Trump in general. But I am a single issue voter, although I did not vote in the last election for various reasons. I was going through something at the time, and I don't like a lot of the people that Trump has around him. But I am truly a single issue, if not voter, then supporter. I will support almost anyone who advocates to protect children from this. So, like, I love this empathy that she's trying to play here does not work on me. And of course, it would work on a lot of other people. Oh, all the Republicans care about is demonizing and bullying trans kids. Meanwhile, they want to take your healthcare away or make it more expensive. It's just so sick to leverage someone's empathy about healthcare issues in order to justify your just depraved agenda.
Have us focus in and debate a misunderstood and vulnerable 1% of the population, instead of focusing in on the fact that they are raiding everyone's healthcare in order to pay for tax breaks for the wealthiest 1%. All Republican politicians care about is making the rich richer and attacking trans people.
Good.
They are obsessed.
And of course, this isn't attacking trans people, right? All these people that are being medicalized, they're being attacked by the politicians that support it and push for those policies, and the medical, quote unquote, medical professionals and all of these various industries that are making bank off of them. So it's so funny to these people. They must feel so evil what the right is trying to do, but they really are just trying to help these people. The most compassionate thing you could do to someone is to not give in to their delusions, especially when giving into those delusions could lead you down the path of permanent disfigurement and medicalization. Truly is the empathetic stance
with trans people. I actually think they think more about trans people than trans people think about trans people.
All trans people are self-obsessed narcissists. Nobody thinks about trans people more than trans people, except for me. I think about trans people a lot, but it's because they're insane. and their movement is beyond evil.
They are consumed with this, and they are extreme on it. They are bringing forward a bill that would put parents and providers at risk of being jailed.
Good. Okay, so jailing people that push for and mutilate children, jailing them, that is the moderate position. That's the moderate position. You know, all the men out there listening, and the women are very protective of their kids. What would you think in your worst moment when you let go and you don't think about trying to be a good person? What would you do to someone if they mutilated your kid? That's the extreme position. Are you picturing it in your head? Because I am. Putting them in jail is the moderate position.
Literally jailed for affirming their transgender child and following medical best practices. It is already hard enough to raise a family today.
Oh my
It is
God.
already hard enough to be a kid today.
Yeah, without you.
And
attacking
families
kids.
with transgender young people are navigating complicated and complex situations, making deeply personal healthcare decisions. And regardless of what decision you might make as a parent, government should never insert itself into the personal healthcare decisions of patients, parents, and providers. That is a basic principle and a basic right that should be afforded to all Americans.
Interesting. Government should never interfere. And of course, right now, Democrats all of a sudden just big libertarians, right? Just massive libertarians that are interested in keeping the government out of your personal space. I can't take it. One thing that I'm interested in is, how did lobotomy end? How did they end lobotomy? I actually don't know, because I often compare the trans thing to lobotomy. It's a very apt comparison. However, the trans thing is 10,000 times worse than lobotomy. Let's ask GPT. How did lobotomy come to an end as a practice? All right, ChatGPT, come on. Lobotomy didn't end because of a single ban or discovery. It faded out as a medicine, ethics, and public opinion all shifted at once. Interesting. Better drugs replaced surgery. Outcomes were increasingly hard to defend. While some patients became calmer, many suffered severe personality flattening, cognitive impairment, incontinence, apathy, loss of initiative, in some cases, death. Also involved medical ethics. Psychiatry shifted towards patients' rights and least harm approaches. So see, lobotomy did not end with some mass decree. That's what I want. I want a civil rights type bill where it's banned. That's why I need the right to win the midterms next year. And because if they get like a giant majority in the House and the Senate, they can actually pass a federal ban on this. Imagine the blue states that don't abide by this. Imagine the National Guard going into these blue states with guns and shutting down these clinics. Just like they did with the Civil Rights Act when they had forced desegregation. That's what I want. Because it's like, I often talk to libertarians and they're like, oh, the free market will decide it. And it's like, okay, well, I guess the free market decided to end lobotomy, but how long is it going to take the market to decide to end the trans thing nationwide? Am I going to have to, I'm 40, I just turned 40. Am I going to have to live in a country for hopefully the next 40 to 50 years and just live with half the country experimenting on kids? I don't want to live in that. I don't want to see this slowly fade into obscurity. I mean, obviously, I prefer that rather than the latter, it being widely accepted and normalized everywhere. But I don't want to live in a country where half of the states are experimenting and torturing children and indoctrinating them into madness. I was hoping that there was some massive ban on lobotomy, but I suppose there are parallels between how lobotomy was ended with what's happening right now, right? Obviously, the outcomes for trans surgeries, specifically on, well, especially on kids, but on everyone, are hard to defend, right? I mean, the first thing, it's like, oh, well, you cut someone's dick off and it puts them in a better state of mind. It's like, yeah, but you cut their dick off. Not that I think it puts them in a better state of mind. I think it just indulges delusion, and they're still on a massive amount of SSRIs and other types of medication that help manage their depression and anxiety and whatever else is going on with them. But it's impossible to defend because you're literally removing healthy body parts from the body. And if you look at this, the outcomes were increasingly hard to defend. And it's interesting because these are hard to defend. The cognitive impairment, it literally impairs your cognition to be put on these drugs. Incontinence, apathy, loss of initiative. A lot of these people develop debilitating bone diseases. They're rendered infertile and unable to achieve an orgasm. I don't think anybody's died from it yet. Not that I'm aware of. But the outcomes are definitely hard to defend when it comes to trans movement. And of course, medical ethics. Informed consent became a serious ethical requirement. And of course, how can someone consent to a gender reassignment surgery if all of the science is a lie? It is impossible to consent to these procedures. You're consenting because you're trusting the experts. What do you do if the experts are nuts? How can you consent to something that is not real and is built on lies? You can't. No one person has ever been able to consent to this. That's my opinion on it. And public backlash and cultural exposure. That's what's happening, right? Massive backlash all across the country. And more people are finding out about this. What is it? A 70-30, 80-20 issue? Something like that? 70, 80%. I don't know the numbers in front of me, but 70 to 80% of the country oppose this, specifically when it comes to kids. So we're definitely seeing a similar pattern emerge with the current trans phenomenon and what happened with lobotomy. So hopefully we don't have to wait as long as it took for lobotomy to fall out of fashion. Like I said, I want them to pass a sweeping bill to end it now, crush it into paste. And of course, that would be better for the people that think they're trans. They can just go to their own churches, dress weird, dress as the opposite sex. If they really want to get a procedure done, guess what? You're going to have to go in some back alley. I don't care if it's not safe. The harm great outweighs the benefits. And of course, there are no benefits other than indulging someone's delusion and giving them this false sense that they have now become their true self. So at least it's taking a similar trend. Hopefully it doesn't take as long as it did with lobotomy. Interesting. Once public trust collapsed, hospitals and governments distanced themselves quickly. That's what's happening here, right? Since they started doing this and the quote unquote attacks on abortion, lots of abortion clinics are shutting down. And of course, these Planned Parenthood clinics, they also have a massive stake in this. They perform, they provide the drugs and all different kinds of procedures and things involving gender reassignment surgery and gender affirming care. I know it's not really gender affirming care. I'm just going to use it here colloquially. So we're definitely seeing that. Ooh, fictional portrayals cemented public horror. Most famously, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I guess we got to wait for a mainstream movie to overtly portray a perverted man who thinks he's a woman who is trying to push for legislation and cultural change in order to normalize kids being butchered. Yeah, I'm not going to hold my breath on that one. That Ed Gein show was on Netflix, and he basically was an autogynephile, but of course, he wasn't portrayed as a trans woman, even though critics of the trans movement all watched that and they're like, oh wow, Ed Gein was a trans woman. Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. So let's move on from Sarah McBride here, and we'll just go to this really short video here because this is history and I think it's important to watch. This is the moment when the House passed Marjorie Taylor Greene's bill. There's no sound.
On this vote, the yeas
Here
are
we go.
216, the nays are 211. The bill is passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
Now think about that. 211 people oppose this. 211 people. That's how detached from reality our supposed representatives are. 211 people. And let's go back to that. Look at that. 4 Republicans, 4 supposed Republicans oppose this bill. How are you a Republican and yet you're trans affirming? No, don't get me wrong. If I were to go look up videos or interviews with these people, I'm sure they have all different kinds of reasoning behind this. Oh, we don't want government and people's private business. We think that should be between a doctor. I don't care. No. I've talked to libertarians about this, or libertarian-minded people, and they're like, yeah, we don't support what's happening to kids, but we also don't support the state. We don't support the state getting involved in personal medical matters. And it's like, bro, you support a cop stopping some guy from throwing a kid off a bridge. You can support a federal agent or a cop or the body of Congress. You could support them protecting kids. That's my big problem with libertarians, is the thing. Like there's just active measures that we can do that don't have to lead to a totalitarian government control to make things better, and yet they oppose it strictly based on their own philosophy, on their own principles, which is admirable, but admirable to a fault, I would say. Oh, and here we have the 4 Republicans. Gunther Eagleman. I don't follow Gunther Eagleman. He's too, he's just some face on the internet. He doesn't contribute to any philosophical discourse or anything like that. He's just an influencer. But here he is. These 4 Republicans voted for child mutilation. There they are. I wonder if they're more libertarian-minded people. If I felt like doing my research and my homework more, I might have looked that up. But I'd rather just show you their faces. So if you ever see them in public and you have a water gun on you, you could squirt them in the face with a water gun. Don't do that. Don't do that. I take that back. That might be assault if you squirt somebody in the water. You could pretend that have your friend run behind them, and like you're pretending that you're squirting your friend with the water gun, but you're actually squirting them. Okay, give yourself plausible deniability. And Dr. Vox Oculi, great account. What are their names? Why don't you list their names? And then here is Anne. Republicans who voted with Democrats: Mike Kennedy of Utah, Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania, Gabe Evans of Colorado, and Mike Lawler of New York. It's not a surprise. Utah is a severely compromised state. Colorado is a progressive hellhole, so I can only imagine their right-wingers. I could only imagine their right-wingers are way more left than a right-winger from Alabama. And a Mike Lawler from New York. I mean, that makes sense, right? How can you be a conservative, supposedly, in New York and, not have the woke trans mind virus worm its way into your brain and slowly take over? So I wouldn't say that these 4 men so much deserve to be primaried as they deserve to be launched into the fucking sun in Minecraft. Can you launch people into the sun in Minecraft? Either way, metaphorically launched into the sun. Shame them and shun them from society and never allow them to participate in discourse or be in any position of power ever again. It's inexcusable. At least if you're on the left, you're indoctrinated into madness, right? It's a part of the program. It's baked into the leftist progressive cake. And what's their excuse? I suppose, like I said, they're in largely progressive run states and cities or whatever, but still, bro, come on. And then we come to the demon in human flesh himself, Scott Wiener. This illegal proposal is designed to eliminate healthcare for trans youth by threatening to destroy hospitals. Of course, that's one of the things that the bill does. It defunds hospitals. It's amazing. Now, of course, it's not going to, I don't know if it's going to get passed or not, but still, it would defund hospitals that perform these surgeries. I thought they already did that on a federal level. They can remove federal funds from hospitals. I don't know if this would further that along and make it slightly more extreme and more comprehensive. And then, of course, he says they're trying to erase trans people from existence. We won't let them. Oh, here we go. Proposed new rules would pull all federal financing from hospitals that continue to provide gender treatments for adolescents. That's what it needs to happen. It seemed with the lobotomy issue that it was largely cultural and organic. I mean, judging from it as just ChatGPT, I don't know if there's, was there a anti-lobotomy political movement? I suppose there could have been. I'm not going to look it up because it's not important, but this is an actual political movement designed to protect kids from this madness. And I definitely, it can't just be completely organic. You need some top-down control and push to change the culture and change these new depraved norms that so many people have accepted in order to get rid of it. So, like I said, don't know if it's going to pass through the Senate, but I do think it's absolutely necessary that this is happening. Then we also go to Scott Wiener here. They say they're protecting kids. They're not. They're harming these kids by blocking their access to healthcare. Absolutely demonic. These comments make clear what this is about, eliminating all trans people of all ages. And of course we do. Nobody gets harmed. All it would happen is that your delusion and perversion will no longer be validated by society as a whole. Feel free to go hang out in your sex dungeons, stick weird stuff up your butts. I don't care what you do. As long as you leave the rest of society alone, stop waging war upon us, and leave the fucking kids alone. That's what I want. Basically, to go back to the 90s, when this was looked at as weirdness and strangeness. And I know these procedures and men infiltrating women's spaces has been happening for a long time, but we're obviously in a much different space in terms of it being normalized everywhere and it happening on a mass scale and specifically targeting kids. It once again, the moderate position is to remove all representation of quote unquote trans people from public life, is the complete moderate position. And here we have, well, let's just listen to him.
Women can.
I've seen this before. I love this.
Men are men. Men can never become women.
No shit.
Women are women.
What?
Women can never become men.
Genocidal language. Round of applause. Imagine growing up ever thinking that making this statement in public would receive a round of applause. Like if I went back into the past and told myself this 30 years ago. Imagine the context that I would have to give in order to explain it to 10-year-old Patrick that him making these statements in public would receive a round of applause. Absolutely absurd. We live in it really is very dystopian in lots of different ways, but the trans issue is particularly dystopian.
Children are innocent and they need our protection.
Based. Yes, they are. They're the most innocent among us. Anyone who messes with children is just, it makes my blood boil. Absolutely makes my blood boil. And then we also come to Secretary Kennedy. He announces 6 decisive actions to protect children from chemical and surgical mutilation. Guys, I apologize. It's not my fault. It's not the quality of the sound. As you know, that's just how this poor man sounds. I love this guy too. There's like some story about him. Like, I'm going to be getting it wrong here, but did he like cut a bear in half and then leave like its corpse in a park or something? This dude has been on some wacky adventures. I don't drink anymore. It's next week, an entire year, 1 year of no drinking. Woo. But I would have loved to gotten drunk with this crazy son of a bitch.
Doctors assume a solemn obligation to protect children. Yet doctors across the country now provide needless and irreversible sex-rejecting procedures.
I love that. I guess that term has been floating around forever, but I was unaware of it. Sex-rejecting procedures, because I just call it mutilation. But it's just perfect. It is perfect rhetoric. You are rejecting the sex of a child. And it's inflammatory if you're like a trans advocate, but it's not as inflammatory as saying mutilation. Mutilation is very inflammatory sounding, but it shouldn't be because it is mutilation. But I understand, if you're trying to win hearts and minds, if you start off just by saying mutilation, people will just look at you as if you're like a crazy bigot. So the sex rejecting procedures is just A+ rhetoric here from the madman.
That violate their sacred Hippocratic oath by endangering the very lives that they are sworn to safeguard. The American Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, peddled the lie that chemical and surgical sex-rejecting procedures could be good for children who suffer from gender dysphoria. They betrayed the estimated 300,000 American youth ages 13 to 17, conditioned to believe that sex can be changed. They betrayed their Hippocratic.
Love that. Conditioned to believe. It's a tip of the hat, a nod of the head to the fact that these kids are being groomed ideologically into this. Fantastic.
Oath to do no harm. So-called gender-affirming care has inflicted lasting physical and psychological damage on vulnerable young people. This is not medicine, it is malpractice. We're done with junk science driven by ideological pursuits, not the well-being of children. A peer-reviewed report published by the HHS Office of the Assistant Secretary for Health last month confirms that sex-rejecting procedures impose medical dangers and lasting harm on children who receive these interventions. So today we are taking 6 decisive actions guided by gold standard science and the week 1 executive order from President Trump to protect children from chemical and surgical mutilation. This morning, I signed a declaration. Sex-rejecting procedures are neither safe nor effective treatment for children with gender dysphoria.
Just fantastic. Amazing stuff. I can't get over the fact that he really touched on the ideological component of this because, like I said, there's multiple reasons for why people think they're trans. But the ideological component is, I don't know if it's the worst. I don't know if it's the most insidious. Honestly, it is for me to transform all of society to trick all of society into viewing the world through your lens. You know, millions upon millions of people indoctrinated into believing this. Oh, and then we also have Rep. Mary Miller from Illinois, my home state. She has a bill. Let's read it. The federal government has no business using Medicaid to finance irreversible gender mutilating surgeries on minors. HR 498 protects our children and puts an end to this taxpayer-funded child abuse. So basically, you're going to take the ability for taxes to be used to perform these procedures, which would be another great step, right? Like, these procedures are extremely expensive, even with taxes, I'm pretty sure. So if you remove the ability for it to be covered by insurance and for the taxpayers to fund it, well, it's going to make it a heck of a lot harder for people to be able to get these procedures. Let's listen to what Mary
I
has to
rise
say.
today in strong support of HR 498, the Do No Harm in Medicaid Act. Medicaid was designed as a safety net to be used only by U.S. citizens when they fall into hard times and need medical support. It was never intended to bankroll irreversible gender mutilating surgeries on vulnerable children. Yet today, this program is being exploited by the far left, preying on young children to advance their radical trans agenda.
It's funny, too. She says the far left. All the Democrats support it, basically. Almost all of them. So is the entire left just the far left at this point? And of course, the answer is yes. I've said this many times. A former colleague of mine has said this many times. There's no such thing as a moderate Democrat. Between this and the critical race theory stuff, they just don't exist. They don't exist.
Adolescence is a vulnerable time for boys and girls. They are growing into the young men and women that God intended them to be. What these children really need is love and wise counsel, not taxpayer-funded, permanent chemical sterilization, mutilating surgeries, or activists profiting from their confusion. The most egregious actor is none other than Planned Parenthood,
Yep.
the leading abortion provider in the nation.
Planned Parenthood is just it is a child sacrifice temple. It's always so funny when people think that we've entered this sort of, secular, rational-minded utopia, and that we've left behind the days when people would cut people's hearts out in order to reap, in order to provide a bountiful harvest that God would award you with this stuff. It's like, no, we haven't changed. Humans do not evolve. We do not change at all. All we're doing is just following the patterns, going through the same cycles as previous civilizations have done. that they've gone through. You know, the players change, the cultures change, the circumstances change, but you know, the overall structure of the cyclical nature of what it is to be human and the madness that consumes society is exactly the same thing.
And now the leading provider of these dangerous procedures. The Do No Harm and Medicaid Act shields innocent children from predatory companies and stops Medicaid from weaponizing against our next generation. The federal government has no business paying for the destruction of children's bodies, and the American people should never be complicit in it.
And you know, I often think it's like, okay, well, you know,
I rise today
sorry,
in
hold on.
strong support of
You know, okay, we'll beat back the tyrants that are pushing this. You know, we'll vote these politicians out and we'll save the kids with these bills. But what do you do with millions of people that believe this? You know, and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of extreme activists that are in positions of power. They're never going to stop. How do you stop them in a liberal democracy? Oh, well, you know, it's going to be a 20-year James Lindsay says, you know, oh, it's going to take this long. But they're never going to stop. So, okay, oh, it's a generational battle. We're going to have to battle it forever. And obviously, there always will be year-long, decade-long battles. But this is a different kind of thing. You can't have people in positions of power that want to do this to humanity and children. You can't. You know, I've often looked at what happened in Nazi Germany. There's lots of controversy surrounding that. But, you know, the denazification of Nazi Germany, you know, basically, it was like a brainwashing campaign, I'm pretty sure, you know, unindoctrinating people from Nazism, removing them from positions of power. But, you know, what would that look like? That, you know, it took a world war in order to accomplish that. Right? So many people dead. You know, how do you, in a liberal democracy, you know, it would take an authoritarian power grab to remove these people from positions of power. You know, it'll just look like fascism. You know, that's why so many people on the right, they're like, we need a new Franco, right? Spanish general, I believe, Franco. We need a Franco, you know, a strong man to take control just for a little bit. And then we could give the power back to the people, which of course is a tricky concept. You know, could it be a ruse, a trick for the left to drive society insane to the point of pushing for a dictator-like character to take control and save us from their madness? But in reality, it's not really a battle between the left and the right. It's between totalitarian lunatics and people that just want to be left alone. So in consolidating power into the state, into one central figure to remove this stuff from the institutions, will that end up just enslaving the country? And if some extremely right-wing person's hearing this right now, they're probably going to call me a cuck. And I'm not even saying that I wouldn't support that kind of measure. It's my feelings on it are complicated. But just, you know, how do you decisively stop this? You can't have these people in positions of power. You just can't. And I do think it's important to highlight detransitioner voices. People that were once considered themselves to be trans but are no longer trans. I mean, they never were trans, right? So can you even detransition from something that you never were? It's a useful term colloquially. I suppose they were detransitioning from being indoctrinated into thinking they were trans. Here's Chloe Cole. She does amazing advocacy work based on this. As you know, putting a face to the evil is right. Like, why did white people? This is a common trope. How true is it? But you know, the idea of black people during segregation trying to just go eat at a restaurant and then being pulled out of the restaurant. They never fought back. They were peaceful. And then they were sprayed with fire hoses. You know, this is a common anecdote that is now sort of used by the left and by people on the right that don't like the more radical black activists that, kind of idolize Martin Luther King, even though he was a socialist. But, that even if it's just a story, although I know it did happen, but in terms of, how effective it was, the The story itself is very effective in getting people to empathize with a Black person not wanting to be segregated based on their race. And I think that's similar with Chloe Cole, especially Chloe Cole. She's nice, always dresses nice, and is very personable and charismatic. But all of these detransitioners are, I feel, extremely important to this, because putting a face on the evil that has happened to children, that could only help the cause of trying to protect them.
Every boy and every girl deserves to be loved the way that they were beautifully created in their mother's womb. And to the young people out there who are struggling with this mental illness, I want you to know that there is a better way out. And it's not too late to accept the beautiful way that God has created you. Every boy.
Amazing. Invocation of God. Love it. They were created this way in their mother's womb. Combining the transcendental world and the material world, God put that child in the womb. That child has a soul. That child is not some blank slate that you can manipulate into being whatever you want or whatever they think they are. And then her appeal to the trans people. These people, a lot of these people hate Chloe Cole because they view her as some right-wing bigot or grifter or opportunist. But she's appealing to the humanity in the people that are being victimized by this. The people that, I guess I'm a right-winger. I don't know what the hell I am. But people that are anti-trans, right? Libs of TikTok. You watch crazy trans people say insane things and advocate for objectively evil things to happen to themselves and to others. But she's helping to foster a type of empathy to them, which I love, because, like I said, even the craziest ones are victims of this. They have been victimized by this. And just like many kids and people that are victimized and abused go on to then victimize and abuse other people. It's actually similar to when a child is molested. Oftentimes that child will then molest another child. Sometimes they grow up and then continue to molest children. Well, these people have been victimized by the trans medical industrial complex, and they think it's a good way of life. So then they become trans activists themselves and then push it onto other kids, further victimizing those kids. Just a endless cycle of victimizing. So the parallels are there. Also, a little bit of news, good news, at least, some good rhetoric from across the pond in the UK. We have a Labour MP, Jonathan Hinder. He believes that Health Secretary Wes Streeting should follow his instincts and not allow the puberty blocker trial on kids. A trial, right? A trial experimenting on kids, saying there is no democratic consent. He says what they need is love, support, and compassion. Children cannot consent to this, which I love this, because the Labour Party is largely socialist. The Labour Party was created by the Fabian socialists, who laid out an entire plan in order to slowly wear away at the liberties and freedoms of the people in Europe in order to sort of usher in a technocratic utopia, which we will cover on the show eventually. So seeing a member of the Labour Party here speak up on behalf of children, speak out against this, it's very heartwarming.
I mean, to be honest, I wouldn't be focused on the money. I wouldn't be spending money on this, but the fundamental point is that these are medically healthy children. There is absolutely nothing wrong with them, and what they need is love, support, and compassion.
Love it.
To actually accept their bodies as they are. They are primary school age in many cases. They're going to be on this trial. They don't know what is happening to them. They cannot consent to this.
Amazing. They're perfect the way they are. They can't consent to it. And primary school kids, little kids, being experimented on. The fact that he's speaking out against this is amazing.
And I think in a few years' time, when these children become adults, they will be asking, who did this to me? And it's not good enough to stand behind some small number of clinicians who do support this when many of them are against it. It's not good enough to stand behind them and say, oh, well, I'm following the evidence. As politicians, we, and I'm just a backbencher, but the government ministers have to take responsibility and say, I think this is okay. And a lot of these young people in future will be looking back and saying, who did this to me? The idea this could be state sanctioned after what happened at the Tavistock, the scandal of young people now coming out of that saying, how on earth did you do this to me? I think is shocking. So health secretary. I spoke to him about it in the House of Commons today, expressed my concerns. I know his instincts are that he's very uncomfortable about this. And I would just say to him, listen to your instincts. The vast majority of the British public do not support this. The vast majority of Labour voters do not support this. I am representing my constituents, as are all the MPs who are standing against this. The vast majority of people don't support it. So there's no democratic consent. Don't do it.
Amazing. I'm actually going to be my co-host and Angel, who will be joining us. Well, I'm not going to release it tomorrow, but we're going to record it tomorrow. The last episode before Christmas, I believe. I'm going to have a great new Christmas theme for us. I got to create it tonight, actually. I love this because all we hear is about darkness in the UK. We hear about crazy gender stuff, Muslims not incorporating themselves well into the culture over there, the native populations being slowly replaced, Pakistani rape gangs. All we hear, and people being arrested for posting spicy memes. All we hear over here in the States about the UK is just horrible, horrible stuff. And of course, the UK, Europe and England and Britain, whatever, is, all of our ideas basically come from there. The basis of our law comes from there. So, to see the sort of what is largely viewed as the foundation of Western civilization, at least, the start of it, I suppose, to see them have fall so far has been kind of heartbreaking to watch. Giant bummer. And to see someone, not only just someone in the UK, a politician, but somebody who is a part of a rather socialist communist party, to see them speaking out against this is just extremely heartwarming. That's all I have to say on that. I just love it. And I suppose we'll talk about Scott Wiener one time. Reading Scott Wiener does not get across Wiener. In order for Wiener to get across, in order for you to really wrap your mind around Wiener, you have to see Wiener and you have to hear Wiener talk. Okay? So here we go.
Today, Trump did one of the cruelest things that he's done so far. And
he sounds like Sloth from the Goonies. Literally, it sounds like he's struggling to exist, is what it sounds like.
He's done a lot of cruel things. He issued a proposed rule. It's not final yet. And
everything about him is off-putting. He just screams child predator, right? Like, honestly, I would be okay with labeling him and Richard Hanania as pedophiles, even though there's technically no proof that they are pedophiles, even though Wiener has passed through and supported legislation that would lessen the penalties for, like, say, if a 24-year-old rapes a 14-year-old, it lessens the penalties. So he's definitely pedophile friendly, which, of course, I would assume that, because I know there's a phenomenon in the gay populace, obviously not all gay people, but there is a phenomenon where older men will befriend younger men, children, and groom them and have sexual encounters with them. So I'm sure he sees that as, of course, he's queer, right? So I don't know. I say normal gay person. Is there a normal gay person? Is it normal to commit sodomy and embrace it? I don't know. I mean, no, I do know. I do not think it's normal. But, right, there's a difference between a queer person, Scott Wiener, and like a gay person, a homosexual who is more conservative minded and, wants to embrace God. There's a difference. And I'm sure this Scott Wiener obviously is queer, and he adopts and embraces the strangest, most depraved, degenerate, evil aspects of LGBTQ culture. So, I mean, I wouldn't put it past him for him to have been a 24-year-old and to groom a 13-year-old, or at least know people that did that. So he's like, oh, well, that was just them, taking that child under their wing and, helping them to grow into the healthy homosexual they are today. It's like, no, Scott, no, that person was raping that person.
It's going to be litigated, but a proposed rule to effectively eliminate health care for trans young people in any hospitals. And what he did was to say to hospitals, if you commit the mortal sin of providing health care to trans kids, even if their families support it, even if their doctors support it, you're going to lose all Medicare and Medicaid funding, which would effectively mean closing down hospitals. So these people, they hate trans people so much that they're willing to close down entire hospitals if that hospital...
And, when I talk to a normie progressive, if I talk about this topic, it just sounds like hate to them. It sounds as if I hate trans people, just like if you talk to about like statistics involving crime and murder in the black populace and critical race theory. They have been trained to think that it's hate by these politicians. That's all they harp on, right? They think the entire right, and specifically the South, just hates all the minorities that they purport to love. So this is all they hear. So it's like, oh, well, the only reason they're doing this is because they hate trans people. No, I'm sure there are people that just hate trans people, but I don't care. You don't get to mutilate kids, Scott. Really sorry, buddy.
God forbid, provides health care to a trans young person. This is despicable. It's bigoted. We need to make sure that hospitals don't just accept this. We have to fight this. And I also want to say, this is on Trump and Republicans for trying to eliminate trans people. It is so despicable. But in a vote in the House of Representatives yesterday, where the House voted to blanket ban health care for trans young people, 4 Democrats voted in favor of that ban, and it would have failed.
I forgot about that. 4 Democrats voted to ban transgender health care for children. I'm not going to look it up now because I'm going to be winding down here in a minute, but I may have to give those Democrats kudos. I don't like the Democrats. I don't like the left. I can never be on the left because I think it's inherently satanic, because they are essentially trying to circumvent the will of God in order to create the utopia on here that would only be able to happen through Christ. So I do think that it is an inherently evil project. But the fact that 4 Democrats voted in favor of this bill, whoever you are, guys, thank you.
Failed without those 4 votes. Democrats need to have trans people's backs. And I just want to say to all of the trans kids and their families out there who are living in fear right now, we see you.
They're living in fear because of you.
Your backs, and we're going to fight for you.
Just one more time. One more boo. One more boo sound. I have to, every time we cover Scott Wiener on here, I think I could do it. I just have to upload an MP3, but I have to upload a wood chipper sound. Yeah, that's definitely going to happen sometime in the future. And then we have King of the Shitlib Night Show Party, the Night Show community, Jimmy Kimmel. Now, Jimmy Kimmel, I don't think he's a good dude, but Jimmy Kimmel seems very indoctrinated by this, you know? Like, I feel like Jimmy Kimmel really believes these things. Then you take a look at a Stephen Colbert. I don't know if he actually believes this. I think that Colbert might be more of a mercenary who is more of a blatant and overt and knowing state actor, as opposed to Jimmy Kimmel, who truly believes these things. That's my take. And then, of course, we have Seth Meyers, who is terrible and a progressive and a communist and just one of the worst. The only one I don't overtly hate is Jimmy Fallon, because I feel like he's just a kind of like a doofus that just wants to have a good time and host a TV show, but he's just adhering to liberal leftist orthodoxy. But anyways, let's see what Jimmy Kimmel has to say.
And then we have JFK's other nephew, the nutty one, who held a press conference with Dr. Oz this afternoon to announce that the government is cracking down on transgender for everyone. Bobby Brainworm and Mehmet the Frog are...
He's cracking down on transgender for everyone. Is he reading that off a cue card? Did a writer write that? Like transgender healthcare? No, he's just cracking down on transgender.
finally putting a stop to something that almost never happens, children having sex.
I love this. The thought process, right? Oh, it doesn't happen. Well, it almost never happens. It's so rare. And of course, once you reach that point, it then it very quickly goes into, well, it is happening and it's a good thing. And we're going to make you do it.
Change operations, which Oz will tell you costs a lot.
Shockingly, a phalloplasty, the creation of a penis, costs on average in America, according to this data, high quality, $150,000.
Think about that. If they ban like the taxpayer funded portion of this, if they remove the ability for it to be covered under health insurance, whatever, that would basically destroy the entire industry. Nobody would be able to get it, including the hormones and the puberty blockers. Take that away, and that'll definitely accelerate this conflict and to largely stopping it. Again, except for people that want to do it in back alleys, which, you know, at that point, I'm not a complete authoritarian. You just have at it. But if a cop finds you, they will arrest you.
For child. And I must point out that the creation of a vagina in that case of a phalloplasty or a scrotoplasty where you add testicles, that's extra.
Yeah, that's how they get you, you know? You go in for, you think you're just going in for a penis, the testicles, you know, part of a set. Nope, they don't even come in pairs. You pay per ball for those.
Hilarious. Please, Jimmy, please renounce your evil ways and go back to impersonating Karl Malone doing blackface and watching dumb bimbos jump on trampolines. Please, Jimmy. It's the only way you could redeem yourself. The people demand it. And then we come to this representative from the United States FDA. This, and once again, obviously the procedures being done on kids and all this stuff is horrible, but there's so many different aspects and facets to this, and there's still horrible things that are happening. They're just less horrible than somebody getting their dick or their breast cut off. He goes on to talk about breast binders here, so I thought that was pretty cool.
Today, the FDA is taking action. We are sending warning letters to 12 manufacturers and retailers for illegal marketing of breast binders for children for the purposes of treating gender dysphoria. Breast binders are a Class 1 medical device with legitimate medical users, such as being used by women after breast cancer surgery. And these binders are not benign. Long-term usage has been associated with pain, compromised lung function from atelectasis collapse, and even difficulty breastfeeding later in life. The warning letters will formally notify the companies of their significant regulatory violations and require prompt corrective action.
Amazing. So see, like, yeah, there's the procedures, there's the chemicals, there's the indoctrination, but then there's stuff like this. Just breast binders harm people. You know, you put them on healthy people and they end up struggling the rest of their life, have trouble breastfeeding. You know, one of the most important things in the world is being able to give your child milk to sustain his or her life. And so just there's just like little things like this within the entire trans phenomenon where people are still being victimized, even though if it's not as bad as the medical procedures that are being done. So I just love this. This all basically came out in one day. Marjorie Taylor Greene's bill, Dr. Oz talking, Kennedy talking, the FDA guy talking. Like, they really coordinated to have like a multifaceted, multi-front assault on this evil movement. And they're really attacking it from every angle, almost every angle that I could see. And I'm very picky about this. Even if I talk to some anti-trans person and I listen to them talk, most of the time I'm like, you're not being anti-trans enough or being anti-trans correctly. Let me replace my good think with your wrong think. Okay. Just the fact that we live in a world now where our authority figures are sane and their main concern is trying to protect kids from this. It's honestly the greatest Christmas present that anyone could give me. So much more work has to be done. We need a federal bill banning it. We need to get it out of the schools. The schools are run by the teachers' unions. They're basically all communists. The ones that don't think they're communists are communists. They just, like I said, they're unaware of it, which is basically sums up the Democratic Party in its current state. So there's so much more stuff that has to be done. And like as we discussed before, that Greene's bill is most likely not going to pass through the Senate, but still it's a start. Keep pushing. You have to keep pushing. This has to end. I like politics. I like talking about politics, but there's so many issues in politics that bore me. I'm interested in stories of good and evil, interested in philosophy. And obviously so much of politics is dictated by philosophy, which is just downstream from theology. But this topic is the one that I care about the most. I'll be talking about it a lot on here. Not all the time. We'll cover, dissident right, classical liberal feuds online. We'll be discussing the fall of empires as we have before. We're going to be discussing Europe soon. We'll be covering a lot of different stuff, but I'm always going to be coming back to this topic. And I discussed this in the first episode of the show in terms of limiting principles. The trans movement, progressivism and leftism in general has no limiting principle really, but the trans movement is like, it's just the obliteration, the destruction of all limiting principles. It is I mean, you look at what they've done to the black populace in terms of critical race theory. You look at what they've done with women in terms of feminism. You know, they're socially engineering people to look at the world through a leftist lens. But this is like the first time that they're socially engineering what they view as a new kind of human. It's so far, the ultimate act of these people attempting to play God and become as gods. It's fascinating, which is one reason why I'm obsessed with it. It is evil, what is happening to people and kids. And it just has to end. This cannot continue. There was another video that I found, and I can't find it. I've been trying to find it, but I can't find it right now. I'm sure I'll find it in a day or two. But I'll just summarize it. It was another official stating that they reject the blank slateism that the transgender movement and queer movement pushes, which to me is the crux of this issue. I think most people would admit that a lot of life is both nature and nurture. We're born a certain way. You know, some people just seem wired to be a certain way. And then the conditions around us, what happens to us in life, shapes us into who we are, right? We're a mixture of both nature and nurture, clearly. But the trans and queer movement suggests that it's all nurture. There's no essence to what makes us human beings, that we are just blank slates, pure tabula rasa. And I've discussed before how the blank slate theory, John Locke's blank slate theory, is largely responsible for the left doing this in the trans movement, the queer movement. It is just a rejection of what we all know, or at least those of us who are still saying what we all know. We know that there is something special inside of us that makes us human, that we have souls, that we are special. Or unless, as Rust Cole from True Detective said, we're all just sentient meat. Although by the end of the show, he did reject this blank slate nihilistic worldview. But I just loved that a government official would say that openly. If it wasn't a government official of the video I saw, it was someone in a position of power, someone that the media wanted to talk to. That they would not just talk about men and women's restrooms, boys participating in girls' sports, even the kids being mutilated thing. Yeah, it's like those are all horrible. They're evil. But it doesn't get to the root of the issue. And to me, the root of the issue is this evil idea that we are not the product of our creator. Well, if you got this far, thank you for listening. And the next episode, I will be back with my co-host. He is at Blight Aga on X. You could find me at Together Everyone, and it's the words Together Every and then the number 1. You can find the podcast, a relatively new account. We've got 84 followers, guys. We've got to bump those numbers up. You can find the Limiting Principle podcast on X at Limiting Pod. And that's it, guys. Thank you for listening if you listened this far. And remember, we're all retarded here, but try to be a little less retarded. And Merry Christmas.
The limit